the legal documents that govern how you co-parent may have been good at one point, but they're not good at another point.
Yeah, and we see this a lot when people are beginning to blend and they're talking about the visitation schedule, the finances, all of these things.
Be prepared for this.
Yeah.
And if it's something you need to do, don't be scared of it either, because there's good resources out there.
And you want to make sure that you are not just practically prepared, but spiritually prepared as well, that you are armored up, that you are prayed up, and that you have that support.
So we're going to give you some practical stuff here that we want you to prepare for this process. Number one, I love what you said about spiritually prepared. Praying, making sure that you're diligently seeking God's wisdom and advice on what you should do moving forward. Number two,
your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way. We are Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We are so excited to be with you today. If you haven't, the Blended Family Conference is coming up October 5th. We'd love to see you there. You can grab your tickets at blendedkingdomfamilies.com.
Yes.
So today we're going to dive into legal issues. Kind of. We're not going to dive into it 100%. We're going to touch it today.
Yes.
So if you are in that situation, or if you're about to be in that situation, we wrote a book last year called Back to Court. It's an amazing book with myself, Vanessa, and Denny Brewer, who is a family law attorney, has been for 35 years, where we address some really practical ways that you can go back, and whether you're doing a modification or going through that original divorce where you're talking about your children. It's a great book to prepare for that process. So what we're going to do is just talk through a few of the points as we look at blended families who are preparing for modification.
Yeah.
So you know something's going on, you know you need a modification, and you want to prepare for that.
Yes.
So we want to first understand that, understanding what custody and visitation is.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of reasons why we can go back for child custody.
Yeah.
Obviously, like if abuse is a part of that, like you want to get the child out of the situation as soon as possible. It can be a change in demographics, financial changes. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why you would need to do a modification for child custody. A cool, interesting fact from the National Step Family Resource Center is that about 50% of step families experience legal disputes related to child custody and visitation rights. These disputes can be exacerbated by the complex family dynamics present in blended families. And so 50%, you guys, that's wild. And I will say that the majority of people that we coach and counsel are either in a legal situation, have gone in one, or have been in one. I mean, I would say about 90%, of blended families have gone through it, or going through one, or going back to one.
Yeah. And I think the one thing to say up front is to understand that, the legal documents that govern how you co-parent, may have been good at one point, but they're not good at another point. And that doesn't mean that you have, extreme, challenges in this co-parenting relationship, or you guys are fighting all the time. I mean, that can be there. Other times it's just saying, hey, listen, what worked when they were 2 doesn't work when they're 14.
Right.
And we want to have a little bit more guidance around that. It can also be, hey, we, both of us have remarried, and there are different challenges that are presented there, or, anything that substantiated a change is the reason you want to go look at a modification.
Sure.
So don't be in complete conflict about this. And I'm going to tell a story about a couple that I've been coaching that is going through this, and kind of the steps that we've taken to look at this. They're newly blended, and really the current papers just didn't respect their current marriage and their current financial situation.
Yeah.
So, and the kids were getting older, and they were going to get faced with different challenges as they were like now, 12, 13, 14, 15. They're going into driving ages, and they're also going into college ages. And so some of the things that govern this weren't exactly on the same page.
Right.
So we looked at, hey, we're going to do a modification. We had them, address issues with an attorney, just to kind of get consultative in that. And we also, the next step was just to send a message to the other parent to say, hey, I'm not completely satisfied with what's going on.
Right.
This is the reasons. I think we should reach an agreement of what a modification should look like.
Yeah.
So that we can co-parent in a more peaceful environment.
Going about it in a way where you try to have that open communication and you try to do it in a peaceful way.
Sure.
Because like you said, not all modifications or child custody situations are bad. Some can be peaceful, but in those two that you're really struggling with your co-parent, you guys aren't getting along. It can be really hard to communicate that. But if you can first go about it, by having that communication and say, hey, this is what me and my spouse are struggling with over here.
Yeah.
Like we've had these changes and we desire this, and just going about it in that manner. Now, obviously, like, there are situations where you have to be more aggressive and take really strong legal action.
Yeah. Yeah, you would love to think that they can all be settled by a conversation.
Right.
Most of the time they can't.
Yeah.
And that's why, you want to be diligent about what you're doing, but also you want to seek wise counsel.
Yeah.
And finding an attorney, in which we go through like in detailed steps in this book, but finding the right attorney that matches the right budget that you have, that matches the right value system that you have, that understands the current situation, that has experience not only with what you're going through, but also has experience in the jurisdiction that you're in, is so important as we look at that process. The worst thing we can do is go into a quote unquote war unprepared and unavailable to make sure that you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
The book is written in 3 phases. One is prepare, one is execute, and the last part is recovery, which is so important. But we want to make sure that we are prepared as much as possible before we go into this.
No, that's so good. And I think, it's like you said, important to seek the legal counsel and seek support. So as you're going through that legal process, seeking out support, whether that's through friendships, maybe you're in a small group or a life group, or even coaching. We had somebody reach out to do just one coaching session with us because this person was going into mediation with their former spouse. They were about to blend, like things were changing demographically, and they needed to adjust the visitation. And so this person just wanted extra support and encouragement, like, hey, have I covered everything? Do you have any other tips or encouragement? And so I think that can always be a benefit as you're going through this process, is seeking out that extra special support that coincides with your legal counsel as well.
Yeah. And make sure that you're on the same page with your marriage too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discount this. When you go through a legal process, it's going to be very invasive. It's going to be very stressful. It's going to challenge you in ways that you may not have thought of before. So making sure that you and your spouse are on the same page, not only with maybe what it's going to cost, but the way that we're going to approach this, the strategy behind it, the end goal that's in mind. End goal, and maybe what we're willing to settle for. Because remember, the goal of litigation is not to win. It is to come to the best conclusion that you can live with, that's best for your children. So you may not get exactly what you're looking for, because what's best may not be that.
Sure.
So kind of having those conversations around that, preparing your marriage for that process.
Yes. And I think just writing down all of your desires, like what is your desired outcome from taking these steps to seek custody modification? Like what is your desired outcome? What would you like? What are the things that you would like to see change that are going to benefit the child and that could be beneficial to your marriage and blended family as well? Again, like you said, Scott, we probably won't get all those things, but just make a list of what that is. Talk through that with your spouse. Make sure that if it's a really bad situation where you're like, hey, maybe there's abuse going on or other things, like, are you maintaining documentation? Are you record keeping? Are you using the family apps to keep record of all of those things? Like, make sure that you are doing your due diligence as well in this process. You're going to go through discovery. You may do, what are they called?
Well, there's depositions, there's interrogatories, there's
all
so
of
many
that,
things.
that you're well prepared. So again, it's not something you want to go into willy-nilly, so to speak. Like, you want to have done your work, you want to have prepared, and you want to make sure that you are not just practically prepared, but spiritually prepared as well, that you are armored up, that you are prayed up, and that you have that support.
Yeah. The interesting thing about divorce decrees, or parenting decrees, or how that is, that's really the connectiveness between you as co-parents in so many cases, because you may not be friends, you may not communicate. And a lot of what, divorce represents is like, hey, I don't want anything to do with this person, and I'm going to live the way I want to live, and I'm going to make the decisions the way I want to make decisions. But what they don't understand is the decree is the connective that says, hey, this is how we co-parent.
Yeah.
And we do need to be on some sort of agreeance. If we can't agree, we need the courts to tell us how to agree on how to do this, because it is in balance with trying to parent in a way that's healthy for the child, make sure there's no conflict, and make sure there's no, this or that, or, as children become adults, the problems that can come with having that imbalance. So don't look at the decree as it's a horrible thing or something you don't want to look at or revisit. It's the way that you can govern the way you co-parent. And those need to be modified at certain times. Or a lot of times they weren't even like in place.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of situations where, they're getting remarried or reblended a family, and I ask them about their decree, and they're like, yeah, we really don't have anything solidified.
Yeah.
When you start introducing new step parents, everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything changes in terms of what's now important, what's not important. And so all of a sudden, those willy-nilly rules are going to become very gray areas where a lot of problems can exist and reside.
Yeah, and we see this a lot when people are beginning to blend and they're talking about the visitation schedule, the finances, all of these things. Because again, as you get married and two become one, like these things are going to change.
Yeah.
And so that's where going back and you're looking through all of that, and depending on what your situation is, if you need to have that child custody modification, you can need to do that. Yeah.
So we're going to give you some practical stuff here that we want you to prepare for this process. Number one, I love what you said about spiritually prepared, praying, making sure that you're diligently seeking God's wisdom and advice on what you should do moving forward. Number two, your marriage. Have the communication, open that up, you and your spouse having extensive talks about what this can look like. Three, let's get some guidance, whether that is from an attorney or from like BKF coaching or this resource. Read, study, prepare, and have those open conversations with you and your spouse. What we didn't say is talk to your children about it.
Yeah.
We don't want you to do that. That's not something that they need to be exposed to at this point.
Yeah.
And then maybe fourth, and you can add a few others, is then seeking good legal counsel.
Right. And I think understanding what are your options, because oftentimes like there are things that can be solved in mediation before you go to sit in front of a judge and things like that. So what are your options? Having a parent facilitator, it can be called different things in different states, but what are the things that you can then implement along the way that can help you guys in your custody modification and thereafter? Like, hey, we don't want to have to do this again and again and again. So what things can we put into place to help us come to resolutions or whatever that looks like after the modification is made? Yeah.
One of the things I would say is which is kind of a myth about this is very seldom are you getting specifically in front of a judge to make this decision. I would say that one, there's a lot of steps that the courts are going to require that you go through, whether that's mediation or going to a arbitrator or even going to an associate judge. I mean, there's so many things that get in there. So again, I think setting your expectations and understanding that process is very, very critical in those steps.
Yeah. We have this stat that says research shows that 60% of families who engage in mediation rather than litigation find it more effective in resolving disputes, including those involving blended family dynamics. The approach can be beneficial in Christian contexts where reconciliation and harmony are emphasized. And that comes from Family Mediation Counsel. Because for us, like, we didn't have to go to the judge. We ended up settling in mediation. And I think that was the best thing, because we had to go in front of a judge, and then our son at the time would have been put on the stand, would have had to experience that whole thing. I mean, that would have been, I just think about like the detriment of what that could have done to him and to the co-parenting relationship, because after the mediation, we had a significant, break in our co-parenting relationship, which was awesome. And so, just understanding that there's different ways that you can go about it, and it doesn't have to be,
it's not what you see on like, TV sometimes. There's a lot of different ways to get to the result. the one thing I would encourage you is that, one, you keep your heart right through this process, because it can become the tendency to be vindictive
Yeah.
and sneak in. So I want you to keep your heart true and make sure that you're seeking God's wisdom and discernment through this process.
Well, Proverbs 11:14 says, "For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." And so that's where your community, your legal counsel, your godly counsel all comes into play. And getting that guidance, asking for the Lord's guidance, his wisdom, but also seeking out that practical guidance from all of
Yeah.
these other people.
Well, and this was just a small taste of what this really is. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot that can be discussed when it comes to, discovering and moving toward a modification of your divorce decree. And again, my advice to you is one, be prepared for this.
Yeah.
And if it's something you need to do, don't be scared of it either, because there's good resources out there. Again, this book, Back to Court, has been a tremendous value to families. It was a lot of it was very interesting to write, and Denny and it just did a great job on this. So if you're struggling in this area, you can find this on Amazon. You can find it. It's called Back to Court, and we just encourage you to do that, and we encourage you to take those steps if you need it. So, guys, I want to thank you for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey friends, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we talk about more blended family topics. Be blessed in all that you do, and remember, nothing will be impossible with God.